Alright, what's up guys? Got a video here, just gonna be some gameplay footage and just gonna mention a few things. Tomorrow I'm planning on streaming
Good day.
the closed beta for Lost Ark. Probably sometime in the early afternoon, maybe late afternoon, just kind of depends. And also, I don't know if you guys saw this information that just came out with Blizzard, how they had those two co-leaders. Apparently the lady already stepped down, which, you know, I think she just got into that position within the last month or two. It was like right before POE2 Resurrected released. So it's just kind of surprising, like that was really short-lived. And they also announced that Diablo 4 is going to be delayed. It sounded like it may have been slated for a 2022 release, and now it sounds more like 2023 or beyond. Basically, they just said that it's not going to come out next year, so it won't be on next year's earnings at any point. Also, Blizzard's absorbing Vicarious Visions, which I don't really know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. It could be good for Diablo. Hopefully they bring them on to Diablo 4. I think they did a pretty solid job with Diablo 2. Resurrected, so if they can bring that same energy where, you know, they don't just take a dump on the fans like Blizzard normally has been doing the last 10 plus years, that would be great. So we'll see what happens. But anyways, I think pretty much the main contenders for best ARPG in the next at least year, maybe 2 years, are going to be Diablo 2, Resurrected, and Lost Ark. I don't know when POE2 is coming out, but that would really be the only other one that could be a contender. Lost Ark just looks really good. The only thing that I'm concerned about is just the potential pay-to-win aspects of it. Anytime there's pay-to-win in an ARPG, it usually kind of ruins the experience from a gameplay standpoint. Also, with it being a Korean ARPG or MMO ARPG, I've played a few others that have come from there, like Vindictus, and I'm trying to think of what else. Pretty much all the NCSoft games. And a lot of times what ends up happening is the games are just, I played Aeon, but that was an MMO, less of an ARPG. But a lot of times with the Korean games, they just end up being super grindy, and they'll have these mechanics in them where it's like you have to level up all your gear to +10, and you can get to +3 relatively easily, but after that it just becomes almost impossible to continue progressing as a free player or a non-pay-to-win player. Or even if the game isn't necessarily pay-to-win, they'll just make it so difficult to progress. Usually they'll have like a shop item that makes it really easy to plus your item, or it'll make it so that, you know, your item will break if you try to plus 4 it and it fails, or any, you know, anything up to plus 10. If it fails, it'll destroy the item and consume all your mats. But if you buy this cash shop item and it fails, it'll prevent your item from breaking. So basically, you're like, if you really want to progress your gear and, you know, get to that end game, you pretty much are forced to buy this stuff off the cash shop, because otherwise you're just gonna break all your gear. That's usually how it goes anyway, from what I've noticed. So I'm not a big fan of those types of mechanics or cash shop items, so that's my main concern with Lost Ark. Otherwise, like the gameplay and the graphics, the classes, and everything in it looks amazing, just from what I've seen. And it looks like it would be a lot of fun to play. Everything looks really flashy. From what I've heard, it runs very smoothly, and there'll be, you know, hundreds of units on screen with no performance issues at all. So it sounds like it's optimized very well, and it's been out, you know, in Korea for several years now, which is a plus because it means a lot of the balance issues and bugs and that kind of thing should have already been sorted out. But we'll just have to wait and kind of see. They even said for the beta, it's kind of like they're covering their own asses, because basically they said you may see stuff in the beta cash shop that isn't necessarily what is going to be in the launch early next year. I think it's slated, it was supposed to come out in November, but they pushed it back. From what I've heard, it's because of Amazon publishing games didn't want it to conflict with Perfect World or something. That may just be a rumor. I'm not really sure. I haven't followed either of those things that closely. But they've said that what's in the cash shop in the beta may not necessarily be representative of what will be in it at release. Almost as if they're just leaving stuff in there to see what the reaction is from the players. So that's kind of what I think they're doing. Just personally, my opinion, that's what I think. Like, why else would you leave stuff in there unless you just want to gauge player reactions? And if there's a really negative reaction to something, you can just say, oh, that's just, you know, in there, but it won't be there for launch. But if you leave it in there and there isn't a big backlash to it, well, then you'll probably just leave it in there, because then you can just plan on making money from it without pissing off too many people. So that's kind of what I think they're doing. But yeah, anyways, that's my take on Lost Ark. POE2, when it comes out, you know, I'm definitely gonna check it out, because I played POE off and on for almost as long as I've well, not quite as long as I've played Diablo 2, but aside from Diablo 2, that's the game that I have probably the second most time in, most amount of time in, and I've played it a lot, but I have a few issues with it. Just the 3-month league, I think it should be a little longer than that. At least 4, maybe 6 months would be better. I like the new content that they add, but just with it dropping every 3 months, and usually it's basically the same thing, just slightly different. It's like, oh, go into this portal and kill this stuff in every zone you go to now. Some of the leagues were cool. Like, I really liked Beyond. That got pretty crazy and hardcore sometimes. But the last few that I've played, it was basically the same thing. Go into this portal and kill everything within the time limit, and get a whole bunch of gear, a bunch of extra gear. So it just kind of got gimmicky, and having to relearn everything when they add a whole bunch of new mechanics. If you haven't played for a league or two, is kind of annoying. It's also between Diablo 2 and Path of Exile. I really don't like how your skill gems are cool in a way. It reminds me of materia from FF7, but at the same time, your class almost, for the longest time, it felt meaningless because there was nothing that distinguished classes from each other until they added the ascendancies, which was relatively recent in terms of the game's lifespan. And even then, it's like you only have access to all your ascendancy points at the very end of the game. And in hardcore, it's kind of sketchy trying to get those last 2 points, because you can get 4 or 6 relatively easily and safely, but if you want those last 2 points, you really gotta weigh the pros and cons of, do you want to lose your character, or do you really want those 2 extra skill points? Because it's pretty challenging. So, lastly, just on D2, I'm having a lot of fun playing it, but the only thing I'm a little not sure about is when they introduce the ladders. I don't know what their plans are. So basically, starting the game was a fresh ladder for the most part, or it was a complete reset. So it made perfect sense for them not to roll out with a ladder right at launch, because you'd have 2 fresh games running at the same time, like non-ladder and ladder, which would both be running completely starting from scratch. And the only difference would be that if they had started both at the same time, ladder would just have access to the rune words and the gear that wasn't in non-ladder. So probably most people would just play ladder because that you would, get access to those things, whereas non-ladder players wouldn't. But if you're a new player, you might not know the difference between the two, and so you might just go into non-ladder without realizing it, and then not have access to these other rune words and gear. So they added ladder rune words into normal gameplay, and all the just basically everything that was used to be ladder only is now in the standard version of the game. So when they come out with the ladder, I don't understand, or I don't know what their thinking is in terms of how they're going to actually get people to play the ladder, because they'll either have to remove the They'll either have to remove the ladder items from standard, but usually if you remove things once you've given them to people, it just pisses everyone off, and you know, you're gonna get a lot of upset people just from that. And
Yes.
but if they don't, the only way they're gonna get people, I think, to play ladder is if they add new stuff, which so far they haven't really said one way or the other. There was like an interview in Japanese that, due to a mistranslation, a lot of people thought that they were talking about adding some new content, like rune words and maybe gear or something, or events, but they've clarified and that wasn't accurate. So, I mean, 6 months from now, or 4 months, when it's, you know, about 6 months into the game, which is I think how long E2 ladders normally would go, if they do a ladder, you know, there may not be that many people that actually go into it and play it, because I don't know why you would, especially with you know, the new BattleNet. It's a little more secure than the old BattleNet. I'm sure that people will find things that, you know, are unintended, or that allow them to abuse something in the game, whether it's like, you know, a hack or some sort of duping. But if you're not aware, in the original Diablo 2, I think the way it worked roughly was that every item had its own unique item code, and if the game didn't detect this item code, so like if you generated an item, eventually the servers or the game or something could detect that and delete the item. So this was like, you know, the security at the time for those items, or for the game. And what the problem with that was that people figured out how to dupe runes and things like that. And so when you duped the rune and then made a rune word, or socketed the rune into, you know, like if you put a Zod into an ethereal socketed item to make it indestructible, it would make it so that those duped runes could no longer be detected, so they could not be deleted by the game's, you know, built-in, you know, dupe protection, or whatever you want to call it. So that's why rune words like Enigma and Breath of the Dying, I'm not sure how common they are right now on softcore, but I've yet to see anyone with an Enigma on hardcore. I haven't played a public game in a little while, but I've yet to see anyone actually have an Enigma, or really any high rune word in hardcore. So maybe that's different in softcore, but I don't know how prevalent those rune words are already. But I think legitimately farming one, or just like not having access to duping runes to create all those rune words, it's gonna make the economy much more what the developers originally intended. Like, Enigma was supposed to be an item that, like, if you saw someone have, you know, or just like some of those high-end rune words, like that was supposed to take probably, you know, years to be able to get, or there just would be so few of them that seeing a player have one, you'd be like, oh, OMG, like, this guy has got, you know, loot hacks, basically. So, you know, it's supposed to be like the end-all be-all of gear, but only, you know, a handful of players were supposed to get it. But in Diablo 2, pretty much everyone had, you know, if you wanted an Enigma, you could get an Enigma. I don't know if that's the case right now. I don't know if that will ever be the case in D2 Resurrected. You know, I'm not totally sure. I don't really like go on those forums, you know, like D2 JSP or whatever it is, where people trade like forum gold and stuff for items. I would assume that they're doing it for D2R like they did for D2. But yeah, I don't know how prevalent those really high end game items are. Damn, these guys are
overburdened.
Hurting.
I am overburdened.
But yeah, so the longevity of D2R, I think, is going to have a lot to do with whether or not they decide to add anything to the... Sorry, I'm looking at all these items. To the ladder. If they add a little bit of new content, even if it's just some rune words, that'll really extend the life of the game. But once people kind of get to a point where, you know, they've done what they wanted to do, everybody's done this so many times now that they'll get their fill of, you know, D2 HD, and maybe they will, after they've done everything that they wanted to do, there's not going to be any mods for this, so people may start to get, you know, a little frustrated or just bored, I guess would be the right word, with what they can and can't do. Because with mods and stuff, it's like a little bit of fresh air to the game, because there's, you know, slight differences, new items, new balance, but most, if not, maybe not everything, but most of the things you can do in Diablo 2 have been discovered. It's been done, it's all been kind of mathed out. Like, you're not really gonna be able to try anything that hasn't been done before in terms of builds. Really the fun comes from leveling up again, gearing out some characters, and once you've done all that, I don't know how much more mileage you can really get out of the game at that point without some new content. And originally I thought maybe they just put this game out to kind of give people something that they'd been asking for, and a little bit of a cash grab, but also to tide us over until D4 came out. And if D4 was going to come out next year, or like late next year or early 2023, I think that would have been right about in the sweet spot. But I don't know how long they'll be able to keep like a really big player base in D2R after some other, you know, like after Lost Ark comes out and maybe POE2. Like if D4 is not right on the horizon, people might start, you know, going and checking out those games, which is going to take some people, you know, out of D2R. So, you know, we'll have to see what happens. Blizzard's just a huge mess right now. You know, who knows what will happen when D4 will come out, if it will be even any good. A lot of people have lost faith in Blizzard. This is honestly the first Blizzard game I've played in over 10 years that I actually enjoyed playing. Pretty much everything they've released since Wrath of the Lich King has been shit, in my opinion. And the only reason I'm enjoying this is because it's one of my favorite games from when I was a kid, and they made it mostly true to the original form. They didn't really add in or take out stuff that pissed me off too much. Some of it was a little bit annoying, but you don't really notice it that much when you're playing, so it's not really a big deal to me. But so much of it, just the music, the atmosphere, everything else, I just can't, get over the nostalgia just yet. It may start to wear down after a while. We'll see what I think after playing some Lost Ark, and I have something that's a little more like current generation to compare it to, because that game looks really flashy. But there's just something about Diablo 2 that, just pulls me back every time. Like, I could have not played it for a few years, and I would just start to get this urge to play Diablo 2 for some reason, and it was almost indescribable why I would have that urge or that pull to play the game. And I would get that, over the last 20 years, ever since, I stopped playing it after World of Warcraft came out. I would just get this urge to go back and play Diablo 2 for some reason. It's almost like a gambling addiction. You just can't quite shake it for some reason. Maybe that's just the RNG, I don't know. But it was almost like a gambling addiction for me. But anyways, those are my thoughts, guys. Kind of went off on a few tangents here. If you watched this long, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching, and remember to give them the D.